Hello and welcome to Screams from the Center, where I provide information on topics I find interesting and give my take on them. In this episode, abortion. We go into the meaning of Roe versus Wade. What is an abortion? The anti-abortion players, the women's choice players. If abortion becomes illegal, then what? The GOP Congress responds to the Planned Parenthood scandal. You don't have to like it for it to be legal. And lastly, this whole episode is not a crisis. Thank you and enjoy. I'd like to talk to you about a topic that everybody feels a little squeamish talking about, and that's abortion. And before we start, we have to establish the idea of what it means to be okay with the idea of legal abortion and not okay with the idea of legal abortion. Because I hate the terms pro-life and pro-choice. On the right wing, mostly the religious people, often the male supremacists, misogynists, things like that, who advocate against abortion rights, I do like to call them anti-abortion. But if you're for abortion, or for abortion rights, I should say, does that make you pro-abortion? No, I don't think so, because in all honesty, I'm not sure very many people are pro-abortion. I have met a few, but I don't think that that's generally the term. But pro-choice seems a bit off. You know, I think of terms like women's empowerment, or just plain rights. A man has a right to control his body, and so should a woman. So, on that basic stance. But if I had to assign a term, I guess I would go with women's choice rather than pro-choice. Because we're not advocating for abortions. There's nobody trying to sell an abortion to someone. There's nobody on a street corner passing out flyers saying, "Need an abortion? Come try us out for an abortion." That doesn't happen. So there is no such thing as pro-abortion or pro-choice. It's women's choice and anti-abortion. So now that we've got the terminology down, let's look at what has been said about abortion. In this segment, we're going to talk about what Roe versus Wade is. This is an often confusing type of Supreme Court decision that a lot of people just don't understand. Now, this was the court decision which basically established that abortion was a right. Although that's technically not true. This is the case that was brought up in 1973. What they found was that you had a right to privacy under the 14th Amendment. So therefore, a medical procedure that was performed between you and persons obligated to confidentiality, your doctor, for instance, could perform a procedure that would be legal and it would be protected as your right to privacy. The problem that I had is this actually more or less focused on the doctor's right to privacy as to whether or not they performed the procedure or not. Now, keep in mind, the procedure was legal in many states at this time, and abortion didn't start becoming illegal until much later in our country's history than people think. This decision, the reason why I don't think it was a good decision is because basically the Supreme Court wrote a law about abortion. They determined when you can have an abortion. They determined that no federal or state can put restrictions on abortion. And they protected it not from the woman's point of view or the woman's privacy or the woman's right to her own body, but the doctor's privacy. And that's why Roe v. Wade was adjudicated wrong. Plus, as much as I really don't enjoy the concept of this, I think that if it was left to the states to decide, that we would probably be about the same place we are today, but maybe a little bit less of the anti-abortion movement. I think the women's choice movement would overpower people, much like it did in the 1920s when women got the right to vote, and when a largely women's movement enacted prohibition. So, that's my take on the Roe versus Wade. I think it was wrongly decided. I am grateful for it in retrospect, but I wouldn't have liked the Supreme Court to have done it this way, because I think this Supreme Court, when they made that decision, they set up this whole civil war over abortion rights, over women's rights. Thank you. So, on the topic of abortion, which is a topic that not very many people like to talk about, we have to define terms. First of all, what exactly is an abortion? Dictionary description would be: an abortion is ending the pregnancy by removing the fetus or embryo from the womb before it can survive on its own. That's a key term, before it can survive on its own. Now, while I disagree with the Supreme Court ruling in Roe v. Wade, because they established when they thought a fetus was no longer a fetus and an embryo was no longer an embryo, the fact of the matter is, we have a definition that says, first off, that what is in the womb is either a zygote, embryo, or fetus. And I know it didn't have that term zygote in there, but we'll just say embryo and fetus. And it must be in a state that it cannot survive on its own. That is what a legal abortion entails. That is what the term abortion entails. If it's a viable child, then you've committed murder. It's plain and simple. Late-term abortions do not happen in a context where the fetus will survive outside on its own. Another type of abortion that's common is a miscarriage. So, abortions can be natural and they can be artificially induced. We have examples of abortion dating all through history, including procedures sanctioned in the Bible that permit abortion. So, currently, most of the modern methods for inducing an abortion are either through medications or surgery. Drugs are administered in the first trimester, and they're often just as good as surgery. Some medical procedures may work in the second trimester, but surgery has a lower risk of side effect. And, well, no abortions are allowed in the third trimester. Now, we all know that abortions can be prevented by comprehensive sex education, easy access to birth control, the morning after pill, condoms, and other types of contraception. But we have a political party that is bent on the idea that abortions not only shouldn't be performed or reduced, but they should be illegal. Now, I, for one, am an advocate of abortions being not necessary, and that's through sex education. We'll go more into that, though. So now we've defined what an abortion is, and we can move on and talk about other subjects within the scope of abortion. Thank you. Continuing our conversation about the tricky issue of abortion, let's look at the two sides. The first side is the anti-abortion movement. This is the largely male and largely religious movement to make abortion not rare, not something that is not as necessary in society, but to actually make it illegal. To make it illegal for an abortion to be performed. So that is the driving force. Now, with the religious group, it's largely because they interpret their religious text as saying that even life in the womb is precious, it's a human, it's fully developed, it's fully cognate, it has a soul. Whatever kind of explanation you have, they vary from group to group. But in essence, the religious anti-abortion group is a group that feels that a fetus and an embryo and a zygote are no different fundamentally from a born child. And that's the crux of the issue. Scientifically speaking, we know that a non-viable fetus is not really a baby. We know that an embryo is not a baby. We know that a zygote is not a baby. So from a scientific perspective, these people are wrong. But each to their own when it comes to religion. So that we have the right-hand side and the religious group. The non-religious group seem to be the more misogynistic, male supremacy kind of group. These are the kinds of people who want to subjugate women. They believe in the idea of women are a subservient group to them. And this is a perfect way to control people. Before the advent of birth control, you didn't see women in the workforce anywhere near the numbers, only rarely during World War II. After the birth control was decided as being legal, and then abortion rights were granted via Roe versus Wade, we saw women taking positions of power, women seeking non-traditional jobs. You have to ask yourself if you think that that's worth it, if you want women in those kinds of positions. I know I want women to be equal to men. I don't want there to be any distinction professionally between men and women. A woman is just as capable of doing pretty much any job that any man is, and any man is pretty much as capable of doing any job a woman can. And that's how I feel. I want it to be equal. So those are your right wing's arguments against abortion. Thank you very much. Abortion rights. And I've talked about both sides of the issue. This is going to be my segment on the women's choice movement, or what a lot of people call pro-choice. Now, the women's right movement is basically saying that women have a right to their own bodies. And during a certain period of non-viability, a fetus in your womb is not viable and therefore is under the control of the mother. This sparks many debates. It's culturally divided us, particularly along the lines of the former southern states, Confederate states. Women's choice advocates say that this promotes equality between men and women. And we've seen the data to prove that. Once birth control and Roe versus Wade had passed, women assumed much more positions of power. They ran in Congress and the Senate, and now we've even got women running for president at a much more frequent rate than we had before. In fact, many of these jobs would never have been considered for a woman. Before Roe versus Wade, it would have been impossible for a female to be an astronaut because she could not control her body. So, at any point in her training, after spending millions of dollars on training, an astronaut female candidate would be disqualified because she got pregnant, because she did not have control over herself. This was the case that would have been before Roe versus Wade and before birth control was legal. So to say that it didn't have an impact, that abortion rights, that birth control rights, these things didn't have impact, is to lie. Now, whether or not you find those particular effects beneficial in your mind, I guess that depends on whether you are misogynistic or into equality. It's about women's empowerment as well. It's about giving women that ability that is equal to men. So it's equality. By giving women's choice a positive, by enacting it, we have empowered half of our population into productive, equal members of society. Now, the case could be made that if you believe religiously or non-scientifically that a fetus and an embryo is just as equal in life as a born baby, then that woman is terminating a living being. Now, we have to figure out where the line is between life and, well, I mean, it's all life. If a sperm and an egg is life, a zygote is life, embryo is life, a fetus is life, a baby is life, an elderly person is life, a plant is life, a virus is life. So you can't use that argument that it's a life that you're taking. Well, yes, we do that all the time. Now, if you want to say that it is a human life, well, technically it is human life, but it's not viable human life. It can't exist on its own. And I don't necessarily mean the concept of nurturing a child. We do know that babies need nurturing. They need to be protected and raised by their parents. They're not autonomous objects. So, but what I mean by viability is the ability to do the functions needed for sustainable life outside the womb. And quite frankly, in my opinion, and in most of the opinion of science, if you're not viable, then the woman should have that right over the fetus. And that is the case for women's choice. Thank you. I want to go with the anti-abortion group again, and this time I want to talk about what they intend to have if they got their way. Now, the strongest proponents for anti-abortion legislation want a constitutional amendment guaranteeing the right of someone being alive and fully cognitive and fully capable of rights from the moment of conception. This is the absolute extreme of this. So, the moment that the sperm and egg join and a zygote is formed, a single-celled zygote, that is entailing the full rights of a 30-year-old, or at least someone under 18. And they want a constitutional amendment guaranteeing that. Now, here's where I love hearing conservatives talk about this. Because I ask them what the punishment should be. Now, before Roe versus Wade, most of the states that had anti-abortion laws might have had a little jail time, a year to 5 years, and a fine. But many of them had just a fine. Now, the anti-abortion movement thinks that abortion is exactly the same as murder. Now, if we take that and run with it and say that abortion is murder, I'm going to advocate on the side of anti-abortionists. So, abortion is murder. Now, abortion is an act that you seek, much like you're seeking poison, a gun, or something like that to murder your spouse. Or you go to a paid contractor, a hitman, to kill someone for you. Abortion requires basically some sort of medical practitioner. I realize that there's back alley abortions and such, but we're going to take this from the kind of legal stance. An abortion requires a medical practitioner. How is this different from, say, a hitman? You seek out, you premeditate that you're going to destroy your fetus. You're going to kill a human being. But you don't want to do it yourself because it's unsafe. You might get hurt. So you go to a medical professional and you hire that medical professional to kill your baby. This is the classic definition of a hitman. This is also premeditated. You don't walk along, trip, fall, land in an abortion clinic getting an abortion. It is a premeditated event. So, if abortion is murder, you are planning, executing, and paying someone to destroy a human life. So if that's the case, it's a premeditated murder. Premeditated murder is punishable by life imprisonment or death penalty in many states. And if they make an abortion amendment to the Constitution, it becomes a federal issue, which the federal government has the death penalty. So we have first-degree murder, premeditated, and enforceable by the death penalty, by the United States government and its court system. Who all gets punished? Well, obviously, the mother does. Before Roe versus Wade, she'd get the fine, she may get the jail time. But if the father of the child knew about the murder, isn't he an accomplice? The doctor is obviously the hitman, so he is, without a doubt, compliant in this egregious act. And what about statute of limitation? Unless the amendment to the Constitution specifically grandfathers people who have had abortions, as far as I know, no state or federally does murder have a statute of limitation. I could be wrong on that, but I'm going to assume it doesn't. So, now you have federally mandated that the woman, the doctor, and possibly the husband, any nurses in the room, are compliant in premeditated hitman-style execution, punishable by the death penalty in our court system federally. And the statute of limitation is none. There is none. So, anybody who's had a legal abortion who is still alive, and any doctor who's performed a legal abortion who is still alive, and any husband who knew that their husband, boyfriend, male counterpart, sperm donor, who has knowledge that this act took place, is now complicit in breaking a federal law for murder. Now, the anti-abortion movement people say that there's around 40 million abortions that have been performed since Roe versus Wade. Now, let's add we'll say 30 million just to round off. Maybe some women get multiple abortions, but we'll say around 30 million women. At least 1 million doctors since Roe versus Wade. And possibly, let's say, 10 million husbands and boyfriends and sperm donors. So let me do my math here. The right-wing holocaust concerning abortion is going to be 30, 40, 41, another 41 million people who are possibly, some of who are possibly alive today. And they should all go to the chair, lethal injection, whatever the case may be. Yet, I don't hear anti-abortion activists calling for this. Sure, they tell us abortion is murder. They show us, back in the day when I was a kid, they showed us the little glass jars with the fetuses, in formaldehyde. Now they have little plastic dolls that they fit in these little, it's like a kind of a stacked Russian doll kind of thing. And they tell me that abortion's murder and that we should not have abortion legal in the United States. But I don't hear even the most radical ones talking about instituting the death penalty, much less going after about 40 million Americans who have had abortions. I don't hear anything about fines or jail time or anything like that either. They're remarkably silent on the topic of punishment. And that should give you pause if you are anti-abortion. You really need to think about what that entails. You need to think about what's the penalty and whom do we apply the penalty to before you just say abortion should be illegal. There are ramifications. Everything has a cause and effect. You have to tell us what you want done with people who break the law. And as far as I can see, all the pro-life, or as I call them, anti-abortion advocates, say that abortion is murder. So we have to treat it that way. Am I right or wrong? Thank you. I'd like to continue our abortion discussion by going into the recent Planned Parenthood events. Now, recently, Planned Parenthood came under fire by a right-wing religious group that accused them of selling baby parts. Now, that group is called the Center for Medical Progress, and basically they've made the charge and they say that they have video, and they've released 4 videos at this point. And they entail one of the medical heads at Planned Parenthood discussing certain financial numbers with planted delegates, talking about selling baby parts. At least that's the way the edits are shown, is that they are selling baby parts. And these are from abortions. Now, we have to keep in mind a certain few facts, that 3% of Planned Parenthood business is abortion. And yes, they are a business. This is a legal procedure that they are charging money for. Now, it is against federal law to sell human parts for a profit. However, it is not illegal to donate human parts or to donate human parts and charge for cost of transport and that sort of thing. And it's turning out that these videos are really just clever edits entailing just that. They're not selling baby parts, they are donating baby parts to research. And they're not even baby parts, they're donating fetal tissue. Fetal tissue is rich in stem cells and other important tissues. These tissues have been responsible for vaccines, medical treatments, and other medical breakthroughs that without it, we would not be where we are today medically. So to say that this is a function that should not happen, that this tissue should not be donated, it should be illegal to use that tissue for research, is to throw medical science back decades. So the attack from the videos is that the Center for Medical Progress is making a claim that Planned Parenthood is selling this tissue, and they're selling it for profit, which would be illegal. However, many organizations, Snopes, Fact Check, and other groups have determined that the prices that were quoted in the video don't represent numbers that would entail a profit. They would mostly be transportation, storage, and extraction fees. And what I mean by extraction fees is separating the tissues out, not the actual abortions themselves. But once the tissue is, once the fetuses, the zygotes, the embryos, once these parts are collected, sometimes they need to be separated out and extracted into base components. Kind of like if you took off pieces from a computer board. So now we have 4 videos from this group, and the Republicans are all aflutter. They want to defund Planned Parenthood. Well, simply put, no charges have been filed against Planned Parenthood or the people involved in the video, the people working for Planned Parenthood. If there's a crime, you should indict. The idea of using the Congress of the United States to remove funding from an organization that is not convicted or even indicted for a crime is a crime in and of itself. But my suspicion is the Republicans know that no crime has been committed, so they're going out of their way to make this a dog and pony show. And if they can get it through, they'll defund Planned Parenthood. This goes into the anti-abortion agenda of not only being against abortion, but being against birth control, family planning, and any kind of medical procedures that don't entail a woman being forced to carry her fetus to term. So, we have a rule in the United States right now that no federal money can go towards an abortion. So the money given to Planned Parenthood is not allocated towards abortive services. Now, I think that's wrong too. First off, we know abortion is a legal procedure. It's as legal as getting a vasectomy, or as legal as getting your appendix removed. So why are we blocking federal funding? Just because we think it's icky? No, it's a legal procedure, and if the government is going to help women, particularly low-income women, then this should be subject to funding as well. I get into arguments with conservatives all the time. If the government allows something to be done, you can be the moral person and say, no, I'm not going to do it. Your money is not connected to your soul religiously. It's not. I'm sorry, if a penny of your tax dollars goes towards a woman having an abortion, you are not culpable for abortion any more than when liberals make the claim that if the state executes a prisoner, we've all committed murder. You can't argue both as the same. Either our money is connected to our animus, or it's not. If you don't like gay marriage, don't get gay marriage. If you don't like abortion, don't get an abortion. If you don't like birth control, don't get birth control. These are simple concepts. You can be morally opposed. You can preach about it. You can stand outside Planned Parenthood and every other abortion clinic out there and say that abortion is a sin against God. That is your absolute right, and I will defend that to the end. But I'm quite frankly getting tired of this idea that if the government says it's okay, if the government says weed is okay or abortion is okay, then we've all agreed that abortion is okay. No! You can be against abortion. Don't get one. Preach against it. That's what your church is for. Stop trying to run the government as your own personal church. You are not connected spiritually to your money. Your tax dollars are not spiritually connected to you. When you pay your phone bill, your money is not connected to that phone company. So if that phone company invests in a company overseas that helps Iran, you're not helping Iran. It's plain and simple. So not only does Congress need to drop the nonsense about defunding Planned Parenthood, we need to get rid of the Hyde Amendment, which outlaws federal dollars being used in abortions. It is a travesty of justice that people cannot have access to legal procedures. Thank you very much. So I'm doing an entire episode here on abortion. It's not because I think that this is an important topic. I really don't. I tend to be, and I've discussed this throughout the segments that you'll see here, that I feel abortion is not something you can protest. You just do or don't do it. I thoroughly believe in the concept that you are not your government. Yeah, I mean, we are the government, but your soul, your sin, your taint, all of these things are not connected to actions by your government. That being said, because of the Planned Parenthood videos, the abortion issue has come into focus again. And I think a big reason for that is this is a great distraction issue. I mean, I'm making an entire episode on it, and I don't even like the subject. I don't think the subject is worthy of our Congress. They should make it legal, and it should be your moral decision as to whether or not you do it. That being said, the right wing is making a case out of this. They are pushing this to the forefront, and people respond because people like being distracted. This is an issue that you don't necessarily run in the middle of, or even perceivably in the middle of. This is an issue where people put you either anti-abortion or women's choice. There's no middle ground. I mean, I do think there is one personally, but it's presented in a way that there's no middle ground. This is what it is. It is a distraction by the Republicans to invigorate their base because they don't have anything. They lack leadership. So here we are talking about abortion instead of trying to get jobs for Americans, get education for Americans, work out foreign policy issues. No, we've got to be distracted by this stupid topic. And I'm sorry I feel that way, but it's a stupid topic. It's an important issue. It's an important issue personally. It is not a national issue. I've outlined before, if you don't like an abortion, don't get one. Protest in front of Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics. Preach it in your churches. Preach it in your lodges. Whatever it is, whatever outlet you feel necessary to make your case known. But no, we have to be distracted by these videos, by this dog and pony show of defunding Planned Parenthood, because that's a thing. Never mind that there are important issues. There are issues that we need leadership on. Trade deals, taxation, education, foreign affairs. But no, here we are. And here is my episode talking about the stupid distraction that is gripping the nation. I hope everybody enjoys it. I want to get my point out on it, but I want to emphasize everything that I say in the following segments, everything can be boiled down to, I think it's a personal choice. You can believe whatever you want. It's personal. This is not the stage to do it. Our national forum is not the stage to do it. People like me doing YouTube videos and blogs, that's a great place to debate it. But in the end, we live in a country where we have the right to our own individuality. And government permission is not government approval. And even if it was government approval, it's not your religion approval. It's not your lodge's approval. It's not your misogynistic dream of what America's supposed to be. You make your own decisions. And when you listen to these segments, just keep in mind, this is what I'm thinking. You make your own damn decisions and leave everybody the hell alone. You can say you hate something or love something, just allow it and allow people to make that choice. Enjoy the episode. Enjoy your distraction. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Screams from the Center. Leave comments below on how I can improve. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. My blog is at screamsfromthecenter.wordpress.com, on Twitter at ScreamsFTCenter, on Google and Facebook, Screams from the Center. Thank you.